Boring history for sleep, the most absurd ancient laws. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where we explore fascinating historical topics in a deliberately soothing and measured pace, designed to help you drift off to sleep. Tonight, we journey through the strange and sometimes bewildering world of ancient laws. As you settle in, imagine the gentle rustling of ancient papyrus scrolls and the distant echoes of town criers announcing peculiar edicts that governed the lives of our ancestors. Introduction. When justice was anything but just in our modern world, we often take for granted the relative reasonableness of our legal systems. Despite their flaws, most contemporary laws have some logical basis in protecting society or maintaining order. But this was not always the case. Throughout human history, legal codes have contained provisions that, to our modern sensibilities, range from amusingly odd to disturbingly cruel. As you rest comfortably, allow your mind to wander back through the corridors of time to civilizations where the concept of justice was interpreted quite differently than it is today, where punishments rarely fit the crimes, where social status determined your rights more than your actions, and where the whims of rulers could become the law of the land overnight. The gentle rhythm of this historical journey will carry you through the ancient world, from the banks of the Nile to the Mediterranean shores of Rome, from the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the misty islands of Britain. With each stop along our journey, you'll discover how our ancestors navigated their daily lives under the shadow of legal systems that were often arbitrary, frequently harsh, and occasionally downright bizarre. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the soft murmurs of history lull you toward peaceful slumber as we explore the most absurd ancient laws ever recorded. Part 1. Mesopotamia. Where it all began, our journey begins in ancient Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, where between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humans first began to organize themselves into complex societies with formal legal codes. The most famous of these early legal systems was the Code of Hammurabi, created around 1754 BCE during the reign of the Babylonian king Hammurabi. This code, carved into a massive black stone stele over 7 feet tall, contained 282 laws that governed nearly every aspect of daily life. While some of these laws seem reasonably fair, even by modern standards, others reveal a society with deeply entrenched social hierarchies and often brutal punishments. For instance, imagine being a builder in ancient Babylon. You've just completed construction on a house for a wealthy merchant. You're proud of your work, having carefully arranged each brick and beam. But one day, several months later, the house collapses due to a structural weakness, killing the owner's son. Under Hammurabi's code, your punishment would be clear and unyielding. Your own son would be put to death. This principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was taken quite literally in Babylonian justice. The soft whisper of wind through ancient reeds reminds us that in this early civilization, the concept of proportionate justice was present, but applied in ways that would shock our modern sensibilities. If you were a surgeon in ancient Babylon, your profession carried immense risk. Should you perform a surgery on a nobleman with a bronze knife, and the patient died or lost an eye, the punishment was severe. Your hands would be cut off. Imagine living with such pressure each time you attempted to heal someone of high status, the weight of potential mutilation hanging over every incision you made. For a society that valued healing, the punishment for unsuccessful attempts seems remarkably counterproductive. Lower status individuals weren't exempt from these harsh penalties either. If a slave struck the cheek of a free person, their ear would be cut off as punishment. The physical body itself became the canvas upon which the law expressed its retribution, a permanent reminder of one's transgressions against the social order. Let us drift further into the peculiarities of Mesopotamian law, where women's rights varied dramatically depending on their social status. A high priestess who entered a tavern for a drink, an establishment primarily frequented by men, could be burned to death for this transgression. The simple act of seeking refreshment in the wrong location carried with it the ultimate penalty. Meanwhile, the marriage customs were equally regulated by strict codes. Brides were selected for young men by their parents, and the arrangement was sealed through an elaborate contract. If a man decided to abandon his betrothal and choose another woman, he still had to pay the full bride price to his original intended's father, essentially paying for a marriage that would never take place. The gentle drone of cicadas in the Mesopotamian evening helps us imagine these ancient citizens going about their lives under the watchful eye of laws that penetrated every aspect of their existence. Part 2. Ancient Egypt, Divine Law. Along the Nile, as we float downstream from Mesopotamia, the currents of history bring us to the banks of the Nile River, where ancient Egyptian civilization flourished for thousands of years under the rule of pharaohs who were considered living gods. When a being of divine status creates laws, questioning them becomes not just illegal, but sacrilegious. In this land of pyramids and hieroglyphs, laws were deeply intertwined with religious beliefs and the concept of Ma'at, the fundamental order of the universe, representing truth, balance, and justice. Maintaining Ma'at was essential, and any disruption to this cosmic order was considered a serious offense. One particularly unusual aspect of Egyptian law was the punishment for perjury, lying under oath. The ancient Egyptians believed that truth was sacred, and those who bore false witness not only corrupted earthly justice, but offended the gods themselves. The punishment? Death. One could literally lose their life for telling a lie in court, a stark reminder of how seriously the Egyptians took the concept of truth and justice. The slow rhythmic flow of the Nile's waters mirrors the measured pace of Egyptian justice, which sometimes extended even beyond death. Even animals were not exempt from legal proceedings in ancient Egypt. If an animal caused harm to a human, it could be put on trial and punished. Imagine a goat standing before a magistrate, unknowingly awaiting its fate for the crime of trampling a farmer's carefully tended field. The animal, of course, had no understanding of its transgression, yet justice, as the Egyptians conceived it, had to be served regardless. For ancient Egyptians, personal hygiene was not just a matter of health or social grace. It was a legal requirement. Records suggest that being unclean could result in punishment, especially for those who worked in proximity to the pharaoh or in temples. The law demanded regular bathing, removal of body hair, and use of perfumes or oils. Those who failed to maintain these standards risked not only social ostracism, but potential legal consequences. The gentle rustling of papyrus plants along the Nile's edge creates a soothing backdrop as we consider another peculiar aspect of Egyptian law, the prohibition against killing certain animals. Cats, in particular, were sacred to the goddess Bastet, and harming one, even accidentally, could result in death. Imagine the anxiety of living in a home where a misstep around your household pet could lead to your execution. Even more fascinating was the Egyptian approach to marriage and divorce. While divorce was permitted for both men and women, a surprisingly progressive stance for the ancient world. The financial arrangements were strictly regulated. If a man divorced his wife without proper cause, he was required to pay her a substantial settlement, often one-third of his property. Meanwhile, if a woman initiated the divorce without adequate justification, she might leave with nothing but her personal belongings. The soft glow of oil lamps in an Egyptian home creates a warm, sleepy atmosphere as we consider how these ancient people navigated their daily lives under divine law. One of the most striking aspects of Egyptian legal history involves their approach to crime and punishment after death. The Egyptians believed strongly in the afterlife, and this belief extended to their justice system. For particularly heinous crimes, punishment could continue beyond the grave. The worst criminals might be denied proper burial rites or have their names erased from monuments and records, essentially eliminating their chance at immortality in the afterlife. This second death was considered far worse than any physical punishment that could be inflicted during life, as the stars shine over the ancient Nile, reflecting the same celestial patterns that guided Egyptian lawmakers thousands of years ago. Let us drift further into our historical journey. Part 3, Ancient China, Legalism and the Rule of Law, as we continue our somnolent journey through ancient legal systems. We travel eastward to China, where as early as the Zhou dynasty, 1046-256 BCE, sophisticated legal codes began to emerge. But it was during the short-lived Qin dynasty, 221-206 BCE, that one of history's most famous and strictest legal philosophies took hold: legalism. Under the governance of Emperor Qin Shi Huang and his influential advisor Li Si, legalism promoted the idea that human beings were naturally inclined towards self-interest and wrongdoing. Therefore, only through strict laws with harsh punishments could society function properly. Unlike other philosophical traditions in China that emphasized virtue and self-improvement, legalism focused on rigid control through fear of punishment. The gentle patter of rain on Chinese tile roofs provides a rhythmic backdrop as we explore this severe approach to maintaining order. In Qin China, the concept of collective punishment reached its zenith with the system known as nine relations extermination. If a person committed a serious crime, such as treason, not only would they be executed, but their entire extended family, parents, siblings, children, and even distant relatives, would also face death. This practice meant to ensure family members would report each other's crimes out of self-preservation, created a society where fear penetrated the most intimate family bonds. The laws of ancient China were remarkably specific, regulating even the most mundane aspects of daily life. For instance, during certain dynasties, the color of clothing one could wear was strictly prescribed according to social rank. Wearing the wrong color, particularly yellow, which was often reserved for the emperor, could result in severe punishment. Imagine the anxiety of getting dressed each morning, knowing that a fashion mistake could lead to imprisonment or worse. The soft rustling of silk robes in an imperial Chinese court creates a soothing audio backdrop as we delve deeper into the peculiarities of ancient Chinese law. Perhaps one of the strangest legal concepts in ancient China was the regulation of thought itself. During the Qin dynasty's brief but intense period of legalist rule, owning books that contradicted official philosophy became illegal. In 213 BCE, Emperor Qin Shi Huang ordered what became known as the burning of books and burying of scholars. Most books that weren't about practical subjects like medicine, agriculture, or divination were destroyed, and hundreds of scholars who had spoken against the emperor's policies were reportedly buried alive. The mere possession of forbidden texts or expression of contrary ideas could result in forced labor or death. The gentle clinking of jade pendants worn by ancient Chinese officials creates a delicate, sleep inducing pattern of sound as we consider how deeply law permeated Chinese society. The concept of filial piety, respect and care for one's parents and ancestors, was so important in ancient China that it was enforced by law. Children who were deemed unfilial could face corporal punishment or even execution in extreme cases. If an elderly parent claimed their adult child had been disrespectful or neglectful, judges typically sided with the parent without much investigation. This created a society where family harmony was maintained not just through moral obligation, but through legal threat. Another peculiar aspect of Chinese law was the punishment known as death by 1,000 cuts, or lingqi, reserved for the most serious crimes. This method of execution involved the gradual removal of small pieces of the body over an extended period. This punishment wasn't just about causing physical pain. It was believed that keeping the body intact was necessary for the afterlife. So this punishment extended beyond death itself by preventing spiritual wholeness. The soft whisper of bamboo leaves in a gentle breeze evokes the atmosphere of ancient China as we continue our soporific journey through legal history. Part 4: Ancient Greece, Democracy and its Discontents. Our journey now carries us westward to the rocky shores and olive groves of ancient Greece, where in Athens during the 5th century BCE, the world's first democracy took shape. While celebrated for its innovations in governance, ancient Greek law contained its own share of peculiarities and harsh provisions that reflect the paradoxes of this sophisticated but often unequal society. In Athens, participation in the democratic process wasn't just a right, it was a legal obligation. Those who appeared to take no interest in public affairs could be subject to the punishment of atimia, form of disenfranchisement that stripped citizens of their rights. Imagine being legally punished not for something you did, but for something you failed to do. engage with politics. This concept of mandatory civic participation stands in stark contrast to our modern notion of political involvement as a choice rather than an obligation. The gentle sounds of waves lapping against the shores of the Aegean Sea create a rhythmic, hypnotic backdrop for our exploration of Greek legal oddities. Perhaps one of the strangest procedures in Athenian law was the practice of ostracism. Once a year, Athenian citizens could vote to banish any person they believed might become a threat to the state. No specific crime needed to be committed. Each citizen would write a name on a pottery shard, ostracon, and if any individual received more than 6,000 votes, they would be exiled from Athens for 10 years, though they could keep their property. This peculiar preventative measure could target perfectly innocent citizens simply because they had become too popular or influential. For the ancient Greeks, even death didn't necessarily end one's legal troubles. In a practice that seems almost comically absurd to modern observers, inanimate objects that caused a person's death could be put on trial in a special court called the Prytaneon. If found guilty, the object, whether a stone, a beam of wood, or any other item, would be ceremonially cast beyond the boundaries of the city, as if exiling the instrument of death could somehow restore cosmic balance. The soft rustling of olive leaves in a Mediterranean breeze creates a gentle soundscape as we delve deeper into Greek legal peculiarities. In Sparta, a Greek city-state known for its military prowess, laws took on an even stranger character. Unlike Athens, which recorded its laws for public knowledge, Spartan law was primarily oral and enforced through custom. One unusual legal requirement was that all Spartan men eat their meals in public communal dining halls called syssitia. Failing to attend these community meals could result in loss of citizenship rights. Imagine being legally required to have dinner with your neighbors every night, regardless of personal preference or family circumstances. The famous Spartan emphasis on military preparation extended into the legal realm, with some disturbing implications. Newborn Spartan babies were examined by elders, and those deemed weak or deformed could legally be abandoned at the foot of Mount Taygetus, left to die of exposure. This brutal practice, shocking to modern sensibilities, was considered necessary for maintaining the strength of the state. A stark reminder of how differently some ancient societies valued individual life compared to collective welfare. The slow, rhythmic dripping of water from a Greek clepsydra, water clock used to time speeches in Athenian courts, creates a soporific effect as we continue our journey. Greek law also created some surprisingly progressive provisions regarding animal welfare, at least by ancient standards. In Athens, there were laws prohibiting the mistreatment of animals used in religious sacrifices. While the ultimate fate of these animals was still death, the law required they be treated humanely before the sacrifice. Working animals like oxen were also granted some legal protections. Killing a working ox could result in the same punishment as murder in certain circumstances. For women in ancient Athens, the law imposed severe restrictions that would be unthinkable today. Classified legally alongside children and slaves as dependents, women required a male guardian, kyrios, for any legal or financial transaction. They could not own property beyond personal items and could not represent themselves in court. Even leaving the house without permission could result in legal repercussions. While these restrictions weren't unusual for ancient societies, they stand in stark contrast to Athens' reputation as a birthplace of democracy and enlightened governance. The gentle evening chirping of cicadas in an Athenian courtyard lulls us deeper into relaxation as we prepare to journey onward. Part 5. Ancient Rome. Law becomes a science. As our drowsy travels through ancient legal systems continue, we arrive at the Roman Forum, the beating heart of what would become the most sophisticated legal system of the ancient world. The Romans transformed law from a collection of customs and edicts into a science with principles, procedures, and professional practitioners. Despite this advancement, Roman law still contained provisions that range from the peculiar to the brutal. The Romans are credited with developing the concept of legal rights for citizens, the idea that the law should protect individuals from arbitrary treatment. However, these protections were far from universal. The famous Law of the 12 Tables, Rome's first formal legal code published around 450 BCE, established different legal standards based on social class. Punishments for the same crime could differ dramatically depending on whether one was a patrician, upper class, or plebeian, common citizen. The soft echoes of sandaled feet on marble floors in the Roman Forum create a rhythmic, sleep-inducing pattern. As we explore the contradictions of Roman justice, one of the strangest aspects of Roman law was the absolute power granted to the paterfamilias, the male head of the household. Under the legal principle of patria potestas, paternal power, father had the legal right of life and death over everyone in his household, his children, regardless of their age, his wife, and his slaves. He could sell his children into slavery, force them to divorce their spouses, or even execute them for disobedience. While rarely exercised to its fullest extent in later Roman history, this legal right remained technically on the books well into the imperial period. For Romans, maintaining public dignity was so important that it was regulated by law. Under sumptuary laws, which attempted to limit conspicuous consumption, citizens were restricted in what they could wear, what foods they could eat, and how much they could spend on funerals and celebrations. One law limited the number of guests at dinner parties. Another specified how many colored stripes could appear on one's toga based on social rank. Violating these laws could result in substantial fines or social penalties. The gentle sloshing of water through Roman aqueducts creates a soothing background as we consider more Roman legal peculiarities. The Romans took insults very seriously, so seriously that they created specific laws against defamation. The offense of injuria encompassed not just physical assault, but verbal attacks on one's dignity or reputation. Composing or reciting poems that damaged someone's reputation could result in severe punishment, potentially including beating or exile. Imagine facing corporal punishment simply for writing a satirical verse about a prominent citizen. Particularly strange to modern sensibilities was the Roman approach to punishment for patricide, the killing of one's father. Those convicted of this crime faced the poena culi, or punishment of the sack. The condemned would be sewn into a leather sack along with a live dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a viper, then thrown into the Tiber River or the sea. This elaborately symbolic punishment reflected the Romans' horror at a crime they considered not just a murder, but a perversion of the natural order. The soft creaking of wooden courtroom benches in a Roman basilica provides a rhythmic backdrop as we delve deeper into the intricacies of Roman law. Roman marriage law contained numerous provisions that seem bizarre by contemporary standards. For instance, the legal concept of usus held that if a woman spent 3 consecutive nights away from her husband's home every year, she could prevent him from establishing legal control over her. Manus. This created the unusual situation where some Roman women would deliberately ensure they spent a 3 night period annually away from home simply to maintain some legal independence. The Romans also developed elaborate laws governing the treatment of the dead and burial practices. Violating a tomb was considered an extremely serious offense, potentially punishable by death for lower class offenders. Even moving a body without proper legal permission could result in severe penalties. The Romans believed that improper treatment of the dead could result in restless spirits, causing problems for the living. So, these laws had both religious and social significance. The gentle night sounds of an Italian countryside create a soporific atmosphere as we prepare to continue our journey through ancient legal systems. Part 6: Ancient India, Dharma, and Social Order. Our sleepy historical journey now carries us eastward to the Indian subcontinent, where one of history's most elaborate and long lasting legal traditions developed. Ancient Indian law was primarily based on the concept of dharma, a complex notion encompassing duty, righteousness, cosmic order, and proper conduct according to one's place in society. The most famous collection of ancient Indian laws is found in the Manusmriti, or Laws of Manu, compiled between 200 BCE and 200 CE. This text outlines laws and customs for the four main castes, Varnas, of Indian society: Brahmins, priests and scholars; Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers; Vaishyas, merchants and landowners; and Shudras, laborers and servants. Outside this system entirely were the untouchables, who faced the most severe legal restrictions. The soft tinkling of temple bells creates a meditative soundscape as we explore the complex world of ancient Indian jurisprudence. Perhaps the most distinctive feature of ancient Indian law was how comprehensively it tied legal rights and punishments to the caste system. The same crime could carry dramatically different penalties depending on the caste of both the perpetrator and the victim. For instance, a Brahmin who insulted a fellow Brahmin might face a small fine, while a Shudra who insulted a Brahmin could face having his tongue cut out or hot oil poured into his mouth and ears. These stark disparities extended to nearly every aspect of life. Higher castes enjoyed greater legal protections and lighter punishments, while lower castes faced harsh penalties for even minor infractions. The law did not attempt to disguise this inequality. Rather, it explicitly codified it as part of the natural and divine order of the universe. The gentle rushing of the sacred Ganges River provides a soothing audio backdrop as we delve deeper into the peculiarities of ancient Indian law. One unusual aspect of ancient Indian legal procedure was the use of trial by ordeal in cases where evidence was insufficient. These ordeals took various forms, all based on the belief that divine intervention would protect the innocent. In one such ordeal, the accused would have to retrieve an object from a pot of boiling water or oil. In another, they might be required to carry a red hot iron ball a certain distance. If their injuries healed cleanly within a specified period, they were deemed innocent. If infection set in, they were considered guilty. Ancient Indian law also contained detailed provisions regarding interest rates on loans that varied according to caste. Brahmins could be charged the lowest rates, while Shudras could legally be charged much higher rates for the same loan amount. Similarly, penalties for non payment varied by caste, creating a system where economic justice was explicitly tied to social hierarchy. The soft rustling of palm leaves used for ancient manuscript writing creates a gentle rhythmic pattern conducive to sleep as we explore more legal peculiarities. Marriage law in ancient India was particularly complex, with 8 different forms of marriage recognized, each with different legal implications. These ranged from Brahma Vivaha, the most prestigious form, with full parental consent and religious ceremony, to Paishacha Vivaha, which essentially legitimized marriage by capture or with a woman who was unconscious or mentally incapacitated. Each form carried different rights regarding inheritance, the status of children, and the relationship between families. For women, legal rights varied significantly based on both their own caste and their stage of life. While some elite women could own property in limited circumstances, most women were legally dependent on their male relatives throughout their lives, first their father, then their husband, and finally their sons if widowed. A woman who violated her dharma by being unfaithful or disobedient could be legally abandoned by her husband with few recourses. The gentle sounds of rainfall during India's monsoon season creates a hypnotic backdrop as we consider more aspects of this ancient legal system. Ancient Indian law contained extensive provisions regarding food and diet that blended legal, religious, and social requirements. Certain foods were prohibited to specific castes, and the preparation of food was subject to elaborate rules about who could cook for whom. Violating these dietary laws could result in loss of caste status, effectively, a form of social death that could be passed down to one's descendants. Perhaps most striking to modern sensibilities was the concept of ritual purity and pollution that permeated Indian law. Contact between castes was strictly regulated, with higher castes needing to perform purification rituals if they came into contact with lower castes in prohibited ways. The shadow of an untouchable falling across food could render it legally inedible for higher castes. These concepts of purity created an elaborate social choreography that governed daily interactions and was backed by both religious sanction and legal enforcement. The soft, rhythmic sounds of traditional Indian tabla drums, played at a slow, sleep inducing tempo, help us transition to our next destination. Part 7, Ancient Israel, Divine Covenant and Legal Innovation. Our journey now takes us to the arid landscapes of the ancient Near East, where between the 10th and 6th centuries BCE, the ancient Israelites developed a legal system that would have profound influence on Western legal traditions through its preservation in the Hebrew Bible. Unlike many ancient legal codes that were primarily creations of rulers or states, ancient Israelite law was conceived as a covenant, a binding agreement between the people and their God. The foundation of this legal system was the Torah, particularly the laws found in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. While many of these laws remain influential in modern legal concepts of justice and fairness, others reveal the peculiar concerns and customs of an ancient Near Eastern tribal society navigating complex relationships with neighboring cultures. The gentle whisper of desert winds through ancient olive trees creates a soothing backdrop as we explore this distinctive legal tradition. One of the most unusual aspects of ancient Israelite law was the concept of the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year. Every seventh year, the land was to remain unplowed and unharvested, a complete agricultural rest. Every 50th year, after 7 cycles of 7 years, the Jubilee required not only that land rest, but that ancestral property be returned to its original family owners, and that slaves be freed. This created a legal mechanism for preventing permanent inequality. Though historical evidence suggests these radical economic reset buttons were inconsistently implemented, dietary laws, kashrut, represented another distinctive aspect of ancient Israelite legal codes. Beyond the well-known prohibitions against pork and shellfish, these laws regulated which animals could be eaten, how they must be slaughtered, and how foods could be combined. The prohibition against cooking a kid, young goat, in its mother's milk, mentioned 3 times in the Torah, eventually developed into the complex Jewish laws separating meat and dairy products. These dietary regulations weren't merely religious preferences, but legal requirements that shaped daily life. The soft sounds of a shepherd's flute, carried on the evening breeze, creates a drowsy melody as we consider more peculiarities of ancient Israelite law. The legal concept of cities of refuge represented an innovative approach to justice in the ancient world. 6 designated cities provided asylum for those who had committed accidental homicide, protecting them from blood revenge while their case was investigated. The person had to remain in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest, at which point they could return home without fear of retribution. This system created a middle ground between complete impunity and the harsh vengeance typical of ancient blood feuds. Another distinctive feature was the law of the levirate marriage, which required a man to marry his brother's widow if the brother died without sons. The firstborn son of this union would legally be considered the son of the deceased brother, ensuring continuation of his family line and inheritance. If the man refused this duty, the widow could perform a ceremony called chalitza, removing his sandal and spitting in his face before the elders, a public humiliation for neglecting family obligations. The gentle crackling of an evening fire outside a desert tent creates a comforting, sleep-inducing atmosphere as we explore further legal peculiarities. Ancient Israelite law contained elaborate purity regulations that affected everyday life in ways that might seem strange to modern observers. A woman was considered ritually impure for a period after childbirth, 7 days plus 33 days after bearing a son, but 14 days plus 66 days after bearing a daughter. During this time, she could not enter the sanctuary or touch sacred objects. Similarly, various skin conditions, bodily discharges, and contact with corpses rendered a person temporarily unclean, requiring specific purification rituals before rejoining community life. The concept of the Sabbath represented another distinctive legal innovation, mandating that not only people but animals and even the land itself required regular rest. Violation of Sabbath regulations could be punishable by death in the most extreme cases, making this perhaps one of history's first legal provisions for mandatory time off from labor, though with far more severe consequences for noncompliance than modern labor laws. The soft, rhythmic sounds of water being drawn from an ancient well creates a repetitive, hypnotic pattern as we prepare to continue our journey. Part 8: Celtic and Germanic Tribes. Law without a state. Our drowsy journey now carries us northward to the forests and moors of Europe, where Celtic and Germanic tribal societies developed legal systems that functioned without centralized state power. These customary legal traditions, operating between roughly 500 BCE and 500 CE, before widespread Christianization, reveal how communities maintained order without the administrative apparatus of more urbanized civilizations. Unlike the written codes of Rome or Babylon, early Germanic and Celtic law was primarily oral, preserved through memorization and recitation by individuals with specialized legal knowledge. Among Celtic peoples, these legal specialists were called Brehons in Ireland and Druids in Gaul. In Germanic societies, law was remembered and applied by assemblies of free men called things, pronounced tings. The gentle rustling of leaves in ancient European forests creates a soothing soundscape as we explore these distinctive legal traditions. Perhaps the most distinctive feature of both Celtic and Germanic legal systems was the concept of wergild, literally man money or man payment. Rather than seeking to punish criminals through imprisonment or execution, these societies assigned monetary values to every person according to their social rank. If someone was injured or killed, the perpetrator had to pay the appropriate wergild to the victim or their family. This system created what we might call a tariff of injury, with specific payments prescribed for each type of wound or harm. Under Anglo-Saxon law, for instance, the loss of a front tooth might require a payment of 8 shillings, while the loss of a thumb could cost 30 shillings. The wergild for killing a noble might be 300 shillings, while killing a peasant might cost only 100. This approach treated crime primarily as a debt to be paid rather than a wrong to be punished. The soft patter of rain on the leaf-covered ground of a northern European forest creates a rhythmic backdrop conducive to sleep as we delve deeper into these ancient legal systems. Trial by ordeal featured prominently in Germanic legal traditions, though with some unusual variations. In the ordeal of cold water, the accused would be bound and lowered into a body of water. If they floated, they were considered guilty, rejected by the pure water. If they sank, they were innocent, accepted by the water. This created the perverse situation where proving one's innocence might result in drowning, though supposedly innocent parties would be quickly retrieved. Another peculiar legal practice was the requirement for compurgation, essentially character witnesses who would swear to the accused's innocence. The number of oath helpers required varied based on the severity of the crime and the social status of the accused. These oath helpers were not testifying about the facts of the case, but rather about the character of the defendant. If someone couldn't gather enough people willing to swear to their good character, they might be found guilty, regardless of other evidence. The slow, rhythmic drumming of raindrops on a Celtic roundhouse roof creates a hypnotic pattern as we consider more legal peculiarities. Celtic law contained unusually detailed provisions regarding bees and honey, a valuable commodity in societies without sugar. In ancient Irish law, if your bees stung someone, you were liable for any injury unless you had properly warned neighbors that you kept bees. If your bee swarm left your property, you maintained ownership rights for a specific period, after which they became the property of whoever's land they settled on. These detailed provisions for such specific circumstances reveal how customary law evolved to address practical problems. Honor and reputation held tremendous legal importance in these societies. Insults and satire could be actionable offenses, with specific compensations required for damaging someone's standing in the community. Irish law even recognized a formal class of satire called glamdisen that was believed to raise boils on the face of its target. Composing such a satire against someone without legal cause was itself a punishable offense. The gentle crackling of a peat fire in a Germanic longhouse creates a warm, soporific atmosphere. As we explore another legal peculiarity, the concept of outlawry represented one of the most severe punishments in societies without prisons. An outlaw was literally outside the protection of law. Anyone could kill them without legal consequence. No one could offer them food or shelter, and they had no right to seek compensation if harmed. This wolf's head status, caput gerat lupinum, meaning let him bear a wolf's head, effectively expelled the person from human society entirely, making survival nearly impossible in harsh northern climates dependent on community cooperation. Women's legal status varied significantly between different Celtic and Germanic societies, with some offering women more rights than contemporary Mediterranean civilizations. In Celtic Ireland, women could own property independently, divorce on various grounds with their property intact, and practice professions including law and medicine. Germanic women, while more restricted, still maintained certain property rights and could represent themselves in legal matters under some circumstances. These protections existed alongside patriarchal structures that still limited women's autonomy in many areas. The soft hooting of an owl in the night forest creates a peaceful audio backdrop as we prepare to continue our historical journey. Part 9. Ancient Japan, the Way of the Warrior and the Code of the Court. Our somnolent journey now carries us across continents to the islands of Japan, where between the 7th and 16th centuries CE, a distinctive legal system evolved that blended imported Chinese legal concepts with native Japanese traditions. This hybrid system created a dual structure. Elaborate written codes governed the imperial court and nobility, while warriors, samurai, operated under their own customary legal understandings based on concepts of honor and loyalty. The Taiho Code of 701 CE represented Japan's first comprehensive written legal system, heavily influenced by Chinese models, but adapted to Japanese social structures. As central authority weakened over subsequent centuries, regional warlords, daimyo, established their own legal frameworks, creating a patchwork of jurisdictions across the Japanese islands. The gentle sound of rain falling on a traditional Japanese tile roof creates a soothing, repetitive pattern conducive to sleep as we explore this fascinating legal tradition. One of the most distinctive aspects of Japanese legal